She thought I was asleep. But I saw the way she touched him on the plane. That's when I knew, the woman I married was no longer mine. So I hit record, and started planning the moment they'd never see coming. Stu was a man who had it all. He was tall, well-built, with a successful contracting business in a small Midwestern town. He had a beautiful wife, Shannon, a high school music teacher, and they lived what appeared to be the perfect life. He loved her deeply, and they were in the process of planning to start a family, something they had talked about for years. Their marriage had been blissful for the first decade. They had a system. Though they didn't make love every night, they always cuddled before going to sleep, and waking up next to Shannon every morning was always a joy for him. To Stu, Shannon was everything he had ever wanted, a woman who was beautiful inside and out, with a vibrant personality that complemented his more reserved nature. Their vacation to Nassau was supposed to be the next chapter in their life together, a romantic getaway to reignite the spark in their marriage, to refresh their bond before they took the next big step of starting a family. Stu had planned everything down to the smallest detail. He was excited to surprise Shannon with everything he had set up, envisioning a few carefree days of sun, sand, and each other's company. He anticipated romantic dinners, laughter, and long walks along the beach. It seemed like the perfect way to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But as they boarded the flight to Nassau, something was off. The whole plane ride was uncomfortable for him, his usual excitement clouded by a growing sense of unease that he couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the turbulence, or maybe the exhaustion from work, but something felt different. As the plane leveled out and the fasten seatbelt sign went off, Stu tried to shake off the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. Shannon, sitting beside him, seemed unfazed, more relaxed than he had ever seen her on a plane. She chatted with him occasionally, her voice bright and light as usual, but the smile that always lit up her face didn't reach her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there, a small change that Stu couldn't ignore. It wasn't until about 15 minutes into the flight that things began to unravel. Shannon, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly got up to use the restroom. Stu, trying to rest his eyes, wasn't fully paying attention. He noticed a quick interaction, a fleeting touch on the shoulder of the man sitting across the aisle, just as Shannon stood up. He thought nothing of it at first, just the small gestures that happen in the cramped space of an airplane. But then, a feeling crept over him, an uncomfortable instinct that made him sit up straighter in his seat. He observed Shannon's body language as she walked down the aisle. There was something about the way she moved, the way her smile lingered a little longer when she spoke to the man who had touched her shoulder. It wasn't until the flight attendants began their service, and Stu's suspicions grew, that he began to put the pieces together. Shannon returned from the restroom and sat down, her behavior still normal. She was talking to him again, but there was a distance in her words that he couldn't ignore. He watched as she glanced at the man once more, a soft smile on her lips. She then settled in her seat, and for the rest of the flight, Stu tried to bury the strange sense of dread rising in his chest. He hoped it was nothing, just his nerves playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew something was off. When the plane finally landed and they made their way through the airport, Stu felt a growing discomfort. He had tried to push the thoughts aside, but they refused to leave. As they boarded the shuttle to the resort, he caught a glimpse of the man from the flight. He was in the same shuttle, just a few rows behind them, casually reading a book. His heart sank, and with it, a wave of anxiety hit him like a tidal wave. Something was wrong. The man's presence was more than just coincidental, it was a confirmation of everything that had been simmering inside him during the flight. Stu couldn't shake the feeling that his wife, the woman he had loved for over a decade, was slipping away from him in the most unimaginable way. As they settled into their hotel room, he noticed Shannon's phone on the table by the bed. Without thinking, he picked it up, and his world changed forever. The screen was unlocked, and there, staring back at him, were messages that weren't meant for his eyes. There was Anthony, the man from the flight, and their conversations were more than just friendly exchanges. They were intimate, filled with flirtations, longing, and a betrayal that cut deeper than anything Stu had ever felt. The words on the screen burned into his mind as he read through them, each one a dagger, each one a reminder of the woman who had sworn to love him forever. Stu's stomach twisted as he sat there, reading the messages. He didn't need to read anymore. The tears that were threatening to break through were quickly suppressed by a growing sense of rage. This wasn't just a betrayal of their marriage, it was a betrayal of everything he had believed in. How could she do this? How could the woman he had spent the last 10 years of his life with, the woman he had trusted, do something so cruel? As he processed the shock, a sense of helplessness overtook him. But then, something else took root, a desire for justice. Revenge. His mind raced, and a plan began to form. He would expose Shannon and Anthony. He would make them pay for the destruction they had caused in his life. Divorce seemed inevitable, but he wanted more than that. He wanted them to feel the consequences of their actions, to understand the pain they had inflicted upon him. And so, as he stood in that hotel room, a quiet storm began to brew inside him. He would make them regret it. This vacation, meant to be the start of a new chapter, would instead become the beginning of the end for his marriage. His anger festered as he watched Shannon settle into bed, pretending everything was normal, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had changed. And as he lay there beside her, his mind worked relentlessly, plotting every detail of his revenge. He wouldn't just confront her. He would ensure that both Shannon and Anthony would suffer the consequences of their actions. The trip that was supposed to rekindle their love would instead become the catalyst for their undoing. I had always suspected something was off, but I had no proof, no tangible evidence. The flight to Nassau was meant to be a fresh start for Shannon and me. We had been drifting apart for months, our connection strained by long hours at work, my growing distance, and her apparent detachment. I thought a vacation might heal the cracks, but that thought now felt like a cruel joke. As soon as we boarded the plane, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my stomach. Shannon was different today, more distant than usual, more preoccupied with her phone than engaging with me. I tried to ignore the discomfort in my chest, attributing it to the long day of travel and the anticipation of reaching our tropical destination. But there was more to it, I could feel it. She took the aisle seat, which wasn't typical for her. Normally, she would prefer the window, something I had always found endearing about her. When I questioned her, she gave me a quick, dismissive answer, something about feeling a little nauseous. I accepted it at face value, but my gut churned with doubt. I couldn't let go of the thought that there was something she wasn't telling me. Why was she avoiding me so much? Why did she seem so distracted? And why did that man at the airport keep looking at her? The unease gnawed at me during the entire flight. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me. It felt as though I was sinking into a pit of anxiety. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to rest, but I was watching her. Her every movement, every glance, every little touch. At one point, she stood up to go to the restroom, and I saw her briefly touch a man's shoulder as she passed him in the aisle. It was subtle, but it didn't escape me. My heart sank as I watched their interaction. The man's hand lingered at her waist as she smiled at him, a smile that wasn't for me. It was as if she was completely unaware of the world around her, caught in a bubble of some unspoken connection between the two of them. The confirmation of my worst fears hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the fleeting touch, it was everything in that moment. Their body language spoke volumes. There was something between them, something I couldn't ignore any longer. I wanted to confront her right there on the plane, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to ask her about it, not yet. Instead, I turned my gaze out the window, pretending to focus on the clouds below, while my mind raced with questions. Was I overthinking things? Could this just be a coincidence? No, my instincts were screaming at me. I knew deep down that something wasn't right. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, but the more I thought about it, the clearer the picture became. The man at the airport, the way Shannon had avoided me, the touch on the plane, it all fit together in a way I couldn't ignore. She was slipping away from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. When we landed in Nassau, I was barely able to keep it together. I could feel the tension in the pit of my stomach, my hands clenched around the handle of my suitcase. Shannon, as usual, was engrossed in her phone, typing away as we made our way through the airport. I couldn't help but watch her, studying her every move, looking for any sign of guilt, any indication that she was aware of the weight of what she was doing. We collected our bags and rented a car, and as we drove to the resort, I tried to push the thoughts out of my head. I wanted to enjoy this vacation, to reconnect with my wife, but how could I when I felt like I was losing her? How could I possibly relax when everything felt so off? At the hotel, our room was beautiful, overlooking the ocean with a pool just steps away. The perfect place to relax and put the worries behind us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beneath the surface, threatening to shatter the fragile peace I was trying to hold onto. As Shannon unpacked, I tried to gather my thoughts. I had to confront her. I had to ask her about what I had seen, about what I had felt. I walked up to her, trying to keep my emotions in check. I hugged her from behind and kissed her neck, trying to mask the hurt I was feeling. "You know how much I love you," I whispered into her ear. She turned to me, a faint smile playing on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I love you too, baby," she said, but there was something distant in her voice, something that didn't belong. It was as if the words were empty, like she was just going through the motions. "I'd never heard you, Shannon, or our marriage," I said, my voice trembling slightly. She pulled away from me, a small shudder running through her body. It wasn't the kind of response I had hoped for, the kind of reassurance I needed. "I know, honey," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the walls between us growing taller, brick by brick. There was a disconnect I couldn't ignore. The unease I had felt on the plane was nothing compared to the growing void between us now. "I love you so much," she whispered, and as she spoke those words, I realized how hollow they had become. The conversation ended awkwardly, and as she left to freshen up, I found myself alone, consumed by the thoughts that had been building in my mind. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had to get to the bottom of this. My suspicions were confirmed, I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. It was time to face the truth. I took her phone from her bag, trying to steady my hands as I unlocked it. The messages were there, just like I feared. The words between Shannon and Anthony, the flirtations, the plans to meet up, to be together, each message a dagger to my heart. "Stu is asleep," Shannon had written. "I liked your squeeze," Anthony replied. The words were like poison, each one sinking deeper into my chest. They were planning this behind my back, making a fool of me, while I was left in the dark. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I held it in. Instead, I snapped a picture of the messages, knowing that this was the evidence I needed. My world was crumbling around me, but I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I slipped the phone back into her bag and went outside, my mind spinning with rage and disbelief. I had to get away. I needed to clear my head. I grabbed my camera and made my way to the bar, keeping my distance from Shannon and Anthony as I watched them interact. The night unfolded just as I had feared. Their chemistry was undeniable. The way they laughed, the way they touched, it was all there, right in front of me. I watched them, my heart heavy with anger and hurt. I could feel the tears building behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't break down now. Not yet. I had to be strong, I had to be in control. As they kissed by the pool, I grabbed my camera and began recording, capturing every moment. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we had without consequences. I had to know more, I had to gather evidence, and I had to make them pay for what they had done. But even as I filmed, my emotions were a whirlwind. I wanted to confront them right then and there, to storm up to them and demand answers, but I knew it would only make things worse. So I held back, recording every kiss, every touch, every intimate moment. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Was this really happening? Was she really betraying me? How could she do this? I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't just walk away. I had to make them face the consequences of their actions. And so, I planned my next move carefully, ensuring that I would expose them for what they truly were, liars, cheaters, and manipulators. The game was on, and I wasn't going to lose. The minutes dragged on, and the more I watched them, the more I realized how deep this betrayal ran. Their laughter, their glances, it was all so casual, so effortless, as if they had been doing this for ages. But I hadn't known. I hadn't known anything. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to confront them, to tear down this web of lies and deceit that had ensnared me. My hands were shaking, but I knew what I had to do. The sense of betrayal was like a constant weight in my chest, gnawing at me relentlessly. Every moment since discovering Shannon's affair had been a struggle to maintain my composure. My mind raced with emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. But as the days went by, the anger began to shift into something darker, something more vengeful. I had been blindsided by the woman I thought I knew. The woman I had married, loved, and planned a life with. Shannon's betrayal was not just an affair, it was an assault on everything I believed in. Now, I had to reclaim control. I had to make them pay. As I stood in the hotel room, the quiet hum of the air conditioning filling the silence, I could feel the slow shift inside me. What started as confusion and heartbreak was now evolving into a clear and calculated plan. I knew I couldn't let this slide. Not after everything. After all, what was justice if it wasn't served to those who deserved it? I had already seen the evidence, the texts, the way they interacted, the coldness in her eyes whenever she spoke to me. But I needed more. I needed something undeniable, something that would expose them both. And so, I began to meticulously plan every move. My mind worked with precision, calculating the best course of action, all while keeping my emotions in check. I had been deceived for too long, and now, it was my turn to turn the tables. First, I needed to gather more evidence. I couldn't just confront them with the texts alone, those could be explained away. I needed more than that. I needed to see them together, to capture them in the act. I knew I had to be patient. It wasn't about rushing in and making a scene. It was about waiting for the perfect moment when they would let their guard down, when they thought they were safe. I remembered the camera. My trusty companion. It had already helped me capture moments I couldn't ignore, moments that painted a picture of betrayal. But now, I needed to get closer. I needed to be in their world, unseen, but always watching. That night, as Shannon prepared for her night out with Anthony, I made my move. I had already set the stage. I had planted the seeds of doubt in Shannon's mind, pretending to be unaware of her lies. I pretended to sleep as she made her phone calls, as she plotted her rendezvous with him. The lies came so easily to her lips, I almost couldn't believe it. But I wasn't fooled. I wasn't the naive man I had been before. I was calculating. I was deliberate. As she handed me the water bottle, I knew it was a test. Would I drink it? Would I fall for her game? No, I would play my part, but on my terms. I poured the contents of the bottle into the sink, refilled it, and resumed my act. I feigned drowsiness as she prepared to leave, pretending to fall into an artificial sleep. Every muscle in my body strained with the need to act, but I had to wait. I had to make sure everything went according to plan. As I lay there, watching her get ready, a part of me, though small, still held on to the hope that this was just a phase, that she would snap out of it. But that hope quickly diminished as she kissed me goodbye and walked out of the room. I was alone again. But not for long. The clock was ticking. The plan was in motion. I followed her to the bar, hiding behind palm trees, carefully positioning myself so I could see everything but not be seen. The anger surged in my veins as I watched them together. Shannon, laughing, smiling like she had with me, but now it was for him. Her eyes, once filled with love for me, were now glazed with desire for another. The rage inside me swelled. But I stayed calm. I had to. I wasn't going to make a scene. This was too important. I had to wait, capture the footage, and then strike. They moved to a more secluded area. I followed. It was easy. They were so wrapped up in each other, so lost in their own world, they didn't even notice me. I filmed their every movement, their every touch. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It was like I was watching someone else's life, a life that no longer had a place for me. The woman I loved was slipping away, and I was helpless to stop it. But I wasn't helpless. No, I was playing a different game now. I had the power. I just needed to get closer, to watch them, and wait for the right moment to strike. They finally arrived at Anthony's room, and I followed, silently, methodically. I knew what I had to do. Once they were inside, I gave them time. I gave them enough time to do whatever they wanted, to solidify the evidence in my mind. I recorded it all, every movement, every touch. I needed this. I needed to see it, to know that I wasn't imagining it. Shannon wasn't just unfaithful, she was taking everything I had given her and throwing it away. And I was going to make sure she knew the consequences of that decision. But as I watched them, something inside me shifted. The anger that had consumed me began to turn into something colder, more calculated. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. I was done being the victim. I was done pretending that everything was fine. It was time for them to face the consequences. I knew I had to act fast. They were too comfortable, too confident. They thought they had won. But I had the upper hand now. I had the power. I had the proof. The next step was to make sure they paid for what they had done. I began to think of all the ways I could disrupt their little paradise. A simple confrontation would be too easy. No, I needed to make sure they suffered. I needed to make sure they understood the weight of their actions. I needed to hurt them, the way they had hurt me. I thought of the things I could do: take her things, strip him of his dignity, expose them both for the world to see. It was about more than just revenge. It was about justice. They had taken everything from me, and now it was time for them to lose everything too. As I stood outside their room, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. This was the point of no return. There was no going back. But I couldn't care. Not anymore. I had been broken, but now I was whole. I was complete in my resolve. I opened the door. They were too wrapped up in each other to hear me.